Hello, my name is Eddie Barragon. This is my presentation on the human immunodeficiency virus, also known as HIV. I'll be covering sort of the basics of it, the history, the pathology, the methodologies used to maintain it, future technologies, and everything else involved with the condition. And yeah, this will be a pretty thorough breakdown of the virus and all of the associated risks, conditions, um, yeah, and maladjusted um, workings of the virus. So, yeah, thank you for joining my presentation. This will be a very thorough and very interesting take on the virus. I look forward to going over the details of HIV and everything else that it encompasses um, in this overall presentation. Thank you. So, what is HIV? Also known as the human immunodeficiency virus. As its name suggests, it is a virus that attacks cells that help the body to fight infection. Now, there is no cure, unfortunately, but modern research and critical medical advancements have allowed people who have been diagnosed with HIV and who have caught it early enough to be treated um, and basically allow the condition to maintain itself without reaching critical or lethal levels. If left untreated, it can become terminal when it becomes the condition known as AIDS, which we'll cover at greater depth in a little bit later on the presentation. So basically, it's a virus that has really no way of being eradicated completely, but with modern day advancements, it can be very manageable, and a lot of people can live full, well-developed lives even with the condition. History of HIV. So HIV was first identified in the United States as a new infection in 1981. Um, However, there is evidence that the virus was present worldwide as early as 1966, with the virus being identified in a case in Norway all the way back then. It was discovered by a trio of scientists. Probably going to butcher their names, but they go as follows: Francois Barré-Sinoussi, Robert Gallo, and Luc Montagnier. I have no idea if that's correct in the pronunciation, but these people were the ones who discovered it and brought it to attention. And all the way back in 1981, this was a really big deal. This was a scare amongst the community and the nation as a whole, because it brought into a light a disease that was primarily identified with the homosexual community. And it was often thought of as what, quote unquote, a gay disease. So that kind of stigma led to a huge amount of discrimination and profiling and segregation and just a whole host of other issues that come along with that as well, in addition to just the mere scientific value of the virus or the medical consequences of treating the virus. All these different social layers added on top of that only really made it harder and more debilitating and traumatizing for people who had to deal with this at the time. So I'm going to go over the pathology and the symptoms of HIV. HIV is most commonly spread through sexual activity. That's the number one method of contamination, of spreading the virus and infecting other people. Also, cuts anywhere in the body, really, anything that penetrates the dermis layers of our inner and outer layer skin, that comes into contact with blood or other bodily fluids such as vaginal fluid, seminal fluid, even significant amounts of mucus potentially. Although that's very common. I mean, that's very uncommon. That's very unlikely to mitigate, to allow the spread of the virus at such high levels with those kinds of bodily fluids. Typically, it's blood or sexual fluids. That's usually what's happening because there is such a high protein and DNA level concentration associated with those fluids. It's not like urea or urine, which is a waste product and not necessarily biologically rich in our genetic material. So that's why, coming into contact with things like urine and to some extent, like sweat, stuff like that, tears, that's not going to spread it as easily as sexual fluid or blood, plasma as well, of course. And the symptoms include, weakness, debilitating weakness, being short of breath, having difficulty in healing the body from minor scrapes, cuts, bruises, that kind of thing. Really, the ability to defend oneself with infections that would be absolutely trivial or common. Something like a staph infection or the common cold could prove absolutely deadly because I haven't mentioned it before, but HIV kills the helper T cells of the immune system, which no longer allows us to fight off infections. So it no longer allows us to produce cells that would be able to identify and fight off and resist infections from any type of pathogen, really. Basically forcing our physiological process to make us a sitting duck for infection. That's what really is the deadly aspect of HIV. Not even so much the virus or the initial infection or the symptoms that it creates, because that's secondary to the consequences down the line of absolutely decimating our helper T cells and no longer allowing us to produce, leukocytes to phagocyze the invading bacteria or viruses. It's no longer possible with extremely high levels of the viral load of the human immunodeficiency virus. And once it reaches the stage of AIDS, which I'll get into a little bit more detail, it really is irreversible at that point. For many years, HIV was wrongly implicated as being a primarily homosexual disease. Contrary to popular opinion, HIV is not transmitted as easily as people would expect. So, anyone of any sexual orientation can transmit and contract HIV. That's it. It does not discriminate based on that kind of arbitrary situation. It is spread through sexual contact, but it can be through any form of sexual contact. Some of the ways that HIV is most commonly transmitted is sharing of needles, through breastfeeding, transferring the breast milk from mother to child, blood transfusion, organ transplants, although some of these obviously are easy to avoid. Unprotected sex, that's probably the most risky and still remains to this day the most common form of transmission. It cannot be transmitted so easily by sharing food, drink, utensils. Obviously it's not zoonotic. It's not going to be transferred by a mosquito bite, touching someone's hand, giving them a shallow kiss, sharing clothes, using public restrooms. None of that is going to be able to transfer the virus to another human being. So these are the kinds of misconceptions and misgivings that a lot of people still have, and proper education is often needed in place to give that person perspective on how the virus can and cannot be transmitted. So AIDS is the terminal form of HIV. It is the most severe and unfortunate form of the virus. With AIDS being developed, there is no chance of an individual reversing or even being treated for the virus. It's simply gone to the point where their immune system is no longer functional in any capacity, in any respect, in terms of developing helper T cells to fight off any potential infection. It's just past the point of no return. It is very avoidable. If HIV is caught and treated early enough, it can be prevented from lapsing into full-blown AIDS. So some of the main symptoms of AIDS: brain fog, trouble thinking, trouble focusing, depression, anxiety, increased stress, retinitis, of course, some breathing problems associated, pneumocystis, pneumonia, tuberculosis. I mean, it basically just opens up your body to a whole host of infections and replication errors in your DNA as well, such as the formation of tumors on people's skin commonly. You can have gastrointestinal issues associated with, tumors, chronic diarrhea, and esophagitis as well. So these are the main and debilitating symptoms of AIDS. So as mentioned previously, there is no way with current technology to cure HIV completely. However, there is a variety of ways for it to be safely and effectively managed and treated with modern day medications. So with modern day antiviral medication, we have a situation where when taken consistently, caught early, and with the closely monitored stance of a medical professional, it is possible to take antiviral medication to the point where the retroviral load of the HIV virus, it's effectively so low that it no longer becomes a concern for the body, and it no longer becomes a concern for that individual to then spread that virus to other people effectively. That's not to say they can't be responsible, because as long as the virus is present in an individual's body, there's always the chance of transmission. That's just a fact. However, it can be greatly reduced to the point where that individual is no longer afflicted with debilitating symptoms or eliminating the progression of HIV into full-blown AIDS. So that's a miracle in and of itself, honestly. But on top of all that, science is an ever-evolving, ever-changing field. In the medical community, of course, there's billions of dollars and decades of research that have been pumped into a cure for HIV or AIDS even, or a vaccine, or something along the lines where it's an effective cure, as opposed to a complete cure. We're not there yet. That's unfortunate, and there's still a lot of work to do. As science and the medical community continue to build on top of what has been learned and the research and the data that's currently out there, it's estimated that within the next 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years, hopefully not too long after that, that a cure could be potentially found. And that would be amazing for people, especially with people who have the more severe form, which is AIDS. That's a game changer for the human species as a whole. As of right now, we have to hold our breaths, move forward, and crunch as hard as we possibly can to get to that point. But with all the progress we've made so far, it really seems like it's only a matter of time. Hope for a cure still exists, but it is also important that research will focus on current treatments and prevention. That's where the majority of the progress has been made. That's where the majority of the demographics of people who suffer with AIDS are still currently in. There are many ways to approach a potential cure. The most promising areas being in the subfields of gene modification, such as the use of CRISPR-Cas9, a few other methodologies as well, or stem cell treatments where stem cells are able to replenish and develop new cellular growth, and potentially even in the immune system after the point where you potentially, even when AIDS has formed and the virus has been eliminated, you can kind of work your way backwards and form a potential cure that way. So there is a lot of potential, there is a lot of promise, and there's a lot of research being made, and a lot of really good results that have been discovered as well. And fingers crossed that it only gets better and better with time. HIV is not what it used to be in the past. When caught in early and monitored closely, it can be treated, it can be controlled, and above all else, the prevention of full-blown AIDS developing is the primary concern. With proper treatment, it can be possible to reduce the retroviral load to the point where it's almost undetectable. So at that point, the person is able to lead a normal life, and even, can not have as much of a concern as the transmission of the virus to other people, although they still have to be careful, of course. The social stigma that AIDS and HIV has carried, where it's considered a homosexual disease or a virus caused by degeneracy, of course, it's nonsense. It no longer is carried in our modern world. People have learned, I think, to the point where there's more of an acceptance and understanding of how the virus actually works, and people make more of an effort to not allow that to stop them from considering and respecting other people for it. As previously stated as well, treatments have advanced so much, and with a cure potentially on the horizon, can only be hoped that one day this will be a virus that will be a footnote in medical history, no longer something that millions of people around the world still have to suffer and die from every year. Thank you for watching my presentation and considering my perspectives and what I had to say and what I had to bring to the table regarding the virus and the subject that surrounds it. This has been Eddie Barragon. Thank you.